Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Yes, we're not going to stop now, and we're going to give some of the we're going to give all the decisions now, which I will go through, and I will start from where we are yesterday. Before I go through the decisions, I'm going to go through them in detail, and what I want is to give. Can we clear the queue now? Then give the authors, all the authors for all proposals, permission to be able to respond or to be able to speak, and also same thing with staff, probably Madvi. So can we give permissions to just the authors? And it's only when I need clarifications, or when I say I, or when I say myself, I am not speaking for myself. I don't mean I mean we co-chairs. So I want us to understand that very well. I'll start with a simple PDP update, which is a proposal from Jody. We looked at this proposal. We find that we think this proposal is a very good proposal because, number one, it defines consensus. Okay, we don't need, and the other good thing about this proposal is we don't need to have all the policy discussions to come out to the PPM all the time. Those are some of the good things that we think, yes, it's good for the community. Then, because if we have all the policies coming all the time, then there is a problem because we are going to have overload. That's something from our side, because we think some of these policies, once it comes to the PPM, sometimes they might not need to come back. Those are some of the issues we have with it. It's also streamlined the work, and it forces people to use the online mailing list because some of the things. But there are lots of, one thing I want to emphasize is there were lots of irrelevant objections about this policy. Okay, a lot of people do not really understand the depth of this policy, and there were lots of things that we do not consider as valid objections to this policy. And especially when it comes to issue about reaching consensus, a lot of people are saying it's going to lead to people just trying to take over the mailing list. I don't think that is going to be the case, because what is going to happen is a situation whereby we're not judging consensus based on numbers. We're judging consensus based on the points, not on numbers. So even if 1,000,001 people are saying something and it is not a valid objection, then it doesn't really matter. Numbers does not count. It's not a game of number. However, there are valid objections to these proposals. Okay, one of it is the way we reach consensus is reached. The proposal proposed that the consensus is reached through a balance on the mailing list, the forum, and not at the PPM. We think the community still to judge consensus. It shouldn't be done just on the mailing list. That is one thing that we feel it's a point from the community. Then issues around how the chairs, how we drop proposals. That is one of the things that we also think has not been addressed enough. And a lot of people were talking about trust in the mailing list. Yes, it's an objection, but for us, it's not a serious problem because we're not going to be judging consensus based on numbers, okay? And also the fact that the policy is saying we must have more than 1 PPM per year. I think it's contradictory, especially with the bylaws, and that is one area that we think it's a major objection. Then the community also think that PPM should be to discuss burning issues. And this is one thing this policy proposal is not really addressing. And Jody, I think is Jody there? Do we have Jody?
Yes, I am speaking.
Okay. Jody, the thing is, are you ready to make some changes to this proposal based on the fear that the community is having?
Yes, of course, but really, I think the points that you mentioned are not valid because, for example, you say the bylaw
No,
says.
Jody. We're not here to say if my points are
Okay,
valid. These are things we have discussed
I will respond in the list.
extensively. Okay, these are things we've discussed extensively between we co-chairs, and it is what it is at the moment. We're not talking about if it is valid or not, but these are concerns that needs to be addressed.
Okay.
Yes.
The point is that they have been addressed already. That's my point.
Okay, Jody, I think we need to address some of these policies. I'm going to give you some of these points. I think this policy is very close because why I want us to do this is we have another policy, which is on the PDP working group, which addresses a similar issue with yours. I will come back and tell you what exactly is going to be the decision on this. Okay, I think I can go ahead. The decision is this policy has not reached consensus because we think it is very close. We had a lot of argument about this policy because it's very close. It's just few points that needs to be addressed. If you address those issues, we think it is a very good proposal and it is something that needs to be looked at by the community. But there are some key issues, issue of more than 1 PPM per year, issue of community think and having online. Those are issues that has to do with day-to-day running of the organization. And those are things that we think we need to be careful about. And that is why we think this policy has not reached consensus. Okay. I would now move to the next one, which is on the PDP working group, which is by Noah. Let me start by saying it is entrusting that the working group will take decision by consensus, an appointment of co-chairs by consensus. To us, to what we've seen by what the community thinks this does not really make sense. Appointing co-chairs by consensus, yes, we have problems with the way we are appointing co-chairs now. But if we now decide to go down the consensus line, we're now going to have some further problems. And those are the things that has been expressed. If you read the mails by the community or from most of the community, you will see that there is that fear in the community. Then the policy proposals, okay, that are chosen by consensus is splitting the election process we already have. Okay, we need to look at the election process. We need to look at some of these issues. Okay, but going by consensus is something that we really need to look at. If you look at most of the objection, consensus may even take months. It might take a lot of time for us to achieve consensus. And at the end of the day, we still have to come back to there is a voting. The problem with voting is how do you address some of those issues? We're going to that. The co-chair should not have hand in the That is one of the things that is being clearly said by the community that we think has not been addressed. The focus on the electoral process instead of compliance, issues around status quo of election and things like that. Then again, the board interfering in issue that has to do with the PDP directly. Those are issues that we think needs to be addressed. The community is saying having board interfere in some of these little things that has to do with the PDP should be avoided. And those are issues that we as co-chairs think are valid issues. And on that basis, we think compared to Jody's proposal, this proposal is very far off from consensus. And what we are thinking is if Jody can actually agree to some of the changes, we would probably suggest that it's better to work with Jody, okay, and try, because I think it's just some little points which I've raised some of them, and those are one of the issues that can be resolved, and so that we can bring this thing back and discuss it. And the next one is the chair election process. For the chair election process, the policy reduces participation, okay? equal representation. And one of the things about the chair election process that was proposed by Jody, the first thing is, which I see that has to be resolved, is the issue of gender. It's saying the two co-chairs cannot be from the same gender. Yes, it's a good thing, but I can say most times it might be a problem. Yes, they shouldn't be from the same country. It might be a good thing, but that gender restriction, we think, the community thinks it is an issue that is an issue for the community and is a big issue. And we think on that basis, and the voting register, that is one of the big issues on that election co-chair process proposal. It is, for example, I would list the issues. The first one has to do with the policy reduces participation. Equal representation is violated because the board has unprecedented power. There is also not enough information on the logistics of the vote. That's the e-voting. That's A. B, there is a contradiction on when the term ends during the meeting. The term ends during the first PPM, corresponding to the end of the term for which they are appointed is not clear enough. And a term may begin or end no sooner than the first day of the PPM. Those are issues that we think is not clear enough that needs to be addressed. Then gender restriction, then the voting register. The first 3 points, we do not consider them as a major point, but the major point on this one is the issue of the voting register. How we validate the voting register. And on that basis, we think this policy has not reached consensus because those are issues that needs to be addressed. I'll move to the next one, which has to do with the board prerogative, which is a proposal also submitted by Jody.
Something quickly. It's in line
Jody,
what you are saying.
Sorry?
It's in line what you are suggesting on the 3 previous proposals.
I don't understand what you're saying.
Okay, you talked about the PDP update, you talked about the PDP working group guidelines and the chair election process. If you look at these 3 proposals, the PDP guideline is somehow something in the middle between the other 2, right? It's including the elections and the others. What I can suggest, and I am happy to do that, is if none of the 3 proposals reach a consensus, let's work with the authors of the 3 policy proposals to make 1 proposal for the PDP and 1 proposal for the elections. Okay,
Jody, that's one of the things we want to suggest.
Okay.
We're not. Unfortunately, the thing is, what we would have preferred is us having one of these things go through, but because they are so far off, and I started by asking you some specific question, which you were not ready to do, and that is why I think we at that point we need to make sure that is where the problem is. We need to have this problem solved.
Abdul Karim, I don't feel comfortable with this dialogue going on. So I think you need to.
Sorry, we're not going to have this. I'm not comfortable also with this dialogue. And Brody, please don't interrupt anymore from now. Except when I ask specific questions. On the board prerogative, okay, with Jody, the board cannot directly interfere with the PDP process. Something good. The terms of reference does not need to be stated. Jody addressed that. The article 3.5 is related to members. Jody addressed that. Piecemeal is good, but we have been doing this and throwing away baby water. That's one of the issues that was raised with this policy yesterday, that we shouldn't do things with piecemeal. But what we co-chair think is that sometimes we need to do some of these things bit by bit, because what we have seen is we're throwing away the baby with the bathwater a lot of time. And the major objection with this proposal has to do with the section that says, as an exception of the preceding paragraph in the absence of election process, for aspects related to the PDP co-chairs appeal committee, this aspect will be handled by the board in consultation with the community. However, this is also a temporary measure and also specific draft policy proposal should be introduced for that. What we think is this is a section that is problematic with this proposal. Jody, are you willing to remove this section from the proposal? Yes or no?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Provided you remove this section from the proposal, we have a rough consensus on this proposal. Provided you remove this section. Okay.
I can do it in the next 2 minutes if you want a new version online.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. Provided that section is removed, we will say we've reached a rough consensus on this proposal, and that is the decision on that. And you can understand the clause, provided that section is removed.
Yeah.
Then the next one is the PDP Compliance Dashboard. The PDP Compliance Dashboard, this policy seems to be there are some issues. There are a number of issues. I have about 7 issues with these proposals, which we think the community thinks needs to be resolved. Okay, because the first one is the issue of how would this compliance dashboard, how would it be set up by staff and things like that, which is not a major issue. Okay, there is also the issue of saying there's an existing system, okay, of guidelines on keeping track of violation members, which is, yes, if there's an existing system, we might need to improve things. Yes, that is one of the concerns of the community. The policy is not binding and does not enforce members to actually follow the rules and violate some of the policies. Those are concerns of the community. And also the issue about if you don't get the mail, if you're ignorant about some of these things, how do you say you never get those notifications? Okay, but one of the major issues about this proposal is the fact that the community is saying it's an administrative issue that should be left to staff, that we don't really need a policy to cover this. Okay, and also the policy takes away some resources and something that we do not really need. And there is no comprehensive system on how the board should take proper actions once members are violating these policies, nor does it give guidelines based on the severity of the violations. We think we need some of these things, okay, as co-chairs, but if we are just reporting those dashboard, if there is nothing to say, if you do this, this is going to be the consequence, then what is the point of having those compliance dashboard in the first place? We think some of these issues needs to be resolved. And on this basis, we think this proposal has some critical issues that needs to be resolved. And we think these proposals, or we want to say a decision is, it has not reached consensus. On the abuse contact updates, okay, one of the major issues we have with it is the staff analysis says there is one of it that has a problem with legacy holders. Not sure how it's going to affect legacy holders. Okay, how does it? Yes, Jody tried to answer that today, but the problem is, yes, legacy holders are not included in the at the moment. But if we have issues with legacy holders, we think this is a problem. For us, it's not a major problem. It's a problem that we can solve. We should be able to solve. The periodic validation from time to time takes 6 months. Some members of the community thinks this 6 months is a long period for the validation. The proposal does not state what is going to be the consequence, which is also one of the other ones, the consequence if there is an abuse. Okay. Personally, I think, I don't know, the issue of GDPR. These are areas, yes, GDPR does not affect us in Africa, but at the same time, we need to look at those issues. And I think, who is database? And on this basis, I want to ask this specific question. Jody, how do you think this policy and GDPR, especially with the who is database, what do you think is going to be the effect on this, especially with GDPR?
Mauritius has an agreement regarding GDPR with the European Union. Okay, so all the WHOIS and the abuse C is just one more data in the WHOIS is already affected. So we don't need to have anything specific about this proposal regarding GDPR, because everything is already part of the whole WHOIS system in Africa.
Okay, that's one of the issues we think that we need to look at. But the critical issue is the definition of abuse. Yes, some people say we don't define abuse. No, Johnny.
Okay.
No. Some people say we don't need to define abuse. Alan said RFC 2142 already defined abuse, okay, and identify what abuse is. If we say we all know what abuse is, we can say we all know, but we have an RFC that defines it. Why not put in the entire RFC, or why not put in definition of abuse into this proposal so that it's going to make it clear? We think that is a major issue, okay, because abuse, the way it is written, is too vague. And what is the essence of having a policy? There is also a clause in the proposal that says, whenever a Phoenix says fit on the basis, okay, he said you need to first define, no, sorry, give me 1 second. There's a paragraph missing in this note. Okay, sorry. There is a clause that talks about when to update the abuse contract update. That can be done every 6 months or whenever a Phoenix sees fit. That seems a little bit too vague. And those were one of the issues that were raised by the community. And on that basis, we think we have not reached consensus on this policy, no rough consensus at all on this policy, and it needs to go back for discussion. Then we'll move to the 7th one, which is the RPKI. The proposal instructs Phoenix to create ROAs for all unallocated and unassigned address space under its control. This will enable network performing RPKI-based BGP original validation to easily reject all the bogus announcements covering resource managed by Afrinic. Okay, it allows resource holders to create ASOs ROI, which will increase, some of these are some of the concerns from the community. Is going to increase or even add more to the prefix on the routing table. Yes, not a major point from our side. Revocation time of the ASO for new allocation. Other RIRs don't have similar policies, and it's not effective if it's not by all other RIRs. I understand LACNIC has it. I'm not sure, maybe EPINIC, but I'm sure it's been implemented by LACNIC. That's one I'm sure of. Okay. For us as co-chairs, we think that we need to play our part in making sure that the internet is safe and secure, and we think RPKI will solve some of these issues. However, there are some issues that we think are critical that needs to be addressed. Number one is the validity period of the ROA or the ASO or the ROA, whichever one it is. Okay, what is the point if you ask members to say we're not using this IP address, put a ROA on it, okay, and for how long would they be able to do that? That means they can keep the IP address that they are not using for a very long time. That is one issue that was raised by the community that we think needs to be addressed. Then when you are revoking it, how long does it take? That is an issue that we think we need to be able to answer before we say it is going to be implemented. Okay. Then again, the issue of when Afrinic accidentally issue ROA for an address in error, what is going to happen? What's going to be the consequence if that is done? Okay. It might also affect the neighbors, and that is one of the issues. Monitoring that it's not just what you are doing. If you are issuing these ASOs or the ROA, and monitoring, okay. Then we understand that if, and this question is specifically to staff, which I want staff to please answer before I move on. Okay, will this policy make it easier to reclaim space? Because Why I'm asking this question is because we know there is problem of reclaiming space in Afrinic at the moment. But do we think this proposal is going to make it easy? Because all you have to just do is to probably the ASO or the ROA on it. Do you think it's going to make it easier to reclaim those spaces? Madhvi.
Hello.
Hi, Madhvi. Yeah.
Okay, in response to your question, when Afrinic reclaims space, the first thing that has to be done is the space from the WHOIS database, ensuring that all child objects for that space, including wild objects, domain objects, everything is removed from the WHOIS database. Okay, and then if this policy reaches consensus, the next step, the sequential steps would be, once the resource is deregistered from the WHOIS, then it will be covered by AS0 ROAs according to the policy. The staff have gone through this and established process that will happen, but deregistration from the WHOIS has to happen for any reclamations, and covering it with an AS0 ROA is something operational, purely operational. Then,
because one of the major concerns of the community is
if I may.
Oh, sorry. Go on, Madhvi.
Okay. And
one of the concerns. Yeah.
Yes, Abdul Karim, go ahead.
No, you go. You finish first.
Okay. And at the time, so if a resource is covered, it's available in Afrinic's pool and is covered with an AS0 ROA, then that AS0 ROA will have to be revoked before source is issued or delegated to that member.
Okay.
Okay. It's similar to, at the moment, it's similar to Afrinic having available space, and the space to be issued to a member, and ensuring that it's this clean space, okay, that it's not being announced by someone, he hasn't been hijacked and everything. It's a clean space, and then it gets issued to the members. If I may, Abdul Karim, I had a clarification regarding the legacy space for the previous policy. Okay. The question about whether the policy covers legacy space, we asked this from an operational perspective. Okay, and the author had clarified. Okay, and the abuse contact will, the way the implementation will be, it is that members will have to adopt it if the policy reaches consensus. But legacy resources may not adopt it because they're not covered by the Afrinic policies.
Okay. Yeah, that's one of the things we think needs to be resolved, but it's a minor issue that I said earlier on. Oh, Jody, please let me. I need to continue. Okay. Jody, when you look at the RPKI policy, I'll give you an opportunity to talk, but not on that issue. On this issue now, there is a clause in the, for example, what was passed by the APNIC community. There is a clause that says ROI, issuing ROI, ASO, the ROA, the ASO ROA for members failing to pay their fees on time. Okay, because there is that fear that it might be used. Okay, what do you have to say about that clause that was included in the one for APNIC about it being used, and the fact that APNIC should consider possible option before membership termination, before creating ASO 0 ROA for those resources during the cooling off period? Don't you think we need a clause like that on this proposal? because there is that fear within the community to say that we have a serious problem about this proposal because we think it's close to consensus. But there were also other issues that was raised this morning on the mailing list, and that we think are probably issues, and I think there are suggestions on how those things can be resolved. Jody, were you able to look at those suggestions?
Jody, I think there is some confusion here because it's APNIC policy don't have anything related to that.
Yeah, but there is concern, the fact that if I'm not able to pay my dues, AFINIC can decide to issue ASO or ROA on my space.
And so what? That's the normal thing, because AFINIC has the right, according to the contract, the RSA, to reclaim resources if you don't pay the bills. That's normal.
Yeah, but sometimes you might have difficulty in paying, and you say eventually pay. There are other means of doing that. Anyway, Jody, I think there is no point discussing this because it's a major issue that we think needs to be resolved, and those are issues that we think you need to look at. And on that basis, we think this policy has not yet reached consensus. We're running out of time, so I really want to do things very fast. Then we now have the last three proposals. I want to do this together. I want to state clearly that in Angola, what we understood, we co-chairs understood from the community is this is now time to have inter-area transfer. That the problem is not that are we due to have it. We have three proposals saying the same thing, almost the same thing, that we need to have inter-area transfer. The problem is we have three proposals and the community is not trying to focus on some of these issues. It is not about having this thing, the inter-area transfer. The issue is about how, okay, and exactly when. So I'm going to pick the proposals one after the other. The first one is the IPV for inter-area transfer, the comprehensive scope. The major problem, I'm going to just go through the major problem with this. The major problem with this is the fact that Madvi also confirmed earlier that it is not reciprocal. If it is not reciprocal, then there is no point having this inter-area transfer because it has been clearly stated, okay? And also it's talking about the IPv6, no, the ASN transfer, IPv6 and ASN, those ones are not necessary, those are minor issues. The major issue with this is the fact that, and also it's giving some powers to board, okay? Which we think is some of the issues that the community is raising that we think it's a major issue. Then on the AFINIC number resources, okay, which is Jody's policy, the AFINIC number resources is transfer policy.
Okay, I think you are confusing the policies. You said you are speaking about the comprehensive, and that was not the case, I think.
No, I'm talking about the AFINIC number resource transfer policy. Okay,
you say comprehensive, so it's not the comprehensive. The comprehensive is.
Sorry. AFINIC number resource transfer policy. On the Jody's, on the inter-area transfer policy, okay. Yes, this policy has a lot of similarities with the last one, which is the resource transfer policy. However, one of the things we think about this policy is the fact that we're doing it also with ASN. Yes and no, it's a major issue, especially with the community, okay? Then another issue is, which I would think it's a major issue, is also the issue of board interference. My question is, what we think is, when we're allocating IPs, board do not really has powers when it comes to IP allocations. When you are transferring and there is a problem, I think we need to look for a way how to resolve it, okay, with our policies, not just saying we leave everything to the board. And also, if we look at the policy on the board prerogative, before they can do that, they need to also come back to the PDP to be able to resolve some of these issues. So these are some of the issues with these transfer policies. And what we want to do is we want to, as much as possible, try to blend these policies together. Because of time, I'm just going to, I'll give the notes I have, okay? If you look at the last transfer policy, there were issues that were raised on it. And those issues, number one, has to do with the issue of if I transfer my resources today, I can come back tomorrow and also say, I want to collect another from Afrinic. So I want to put this to the authors of the last of the, to Taiwo and Anthony. Are you ready to include the fact that there must be a cooling off period? I am going to, or we are saying we should suggest probably a 12-month cooling off period. Are you willing to include this? Anthony, Taiwo? Are you willing to include a 12-month cooling off period to say, once you transfer your policy, your resources to another user in another for inter-area transfer, you cannot come back within the next 12 months to say you need another, because it's like an abuse. You've just given what you have, and you're coming back to say I need it. Are you willing to include that in your proposal?
We're open.
Okay.
Yeah, we're open to including that. So
the other thing is,
yes.
Okay. The other thing is the issue of the legacy transfer. If I'm a legacy, if I'm transferring, if I'm a legacy holder, just like Jody mentioned, it's going to give problem to say I have my resources now is tagged legacy. Because I'm moving from one RIR to the other, then it's not going to be tagged legacy anymore. We think it's a major issue as raised by Jody earlier today. Are you willing to remove that clause from your policy proposal?
Yes, because what we're after is the growth of the region and the implementation of these policies for us to be able to meet up with international standards. So we're ready to remove that clause as long as it would help the community. So we are ready to remove that clause, and as well, we are ready to add 12 months.
Okay, then also, Madhvi raised the issue of transfer has to be done between two RIRs. When the transfer is completed, then the RIR will inform whoever is doing the transfer, okay, that we have completed the process. I think that's also a point that should be included. Are you willing to include this? I know you said it's been included already.
Yes, from my own point of view, that's already included. So, but from my understanding of what you're saying,
but you need to make that clear.
There was, yes, there's an issue of clarity. So that is something we can obviously work on, because from my own understanding, what you're saying is exactly what I intended to say. But you're saying I didn't say that clearly. So that's already something that's, yes.
What we think, in conclusion, because we have about 3 minutes left. In conclusion, what we think is we have three proposals. One is far away. It's not going to reach consensus because it's quite far away, which I've listed some of the issues. We have Jody's proposal, which is also individual close to Taiwo's proposals. And based on the issues that has been raised, when we looked at these proposals, we looked at the issues that has been raised. And that was why I said the major issue that was raised with the last one was the issue of maybe fraud. You transfer today and you come back to tomorrow and say you want more from Afrinic. And you have agreed to add that clause to your proposal. Provided you add those three things I've listed in your proposal, I want to say the transfer, the Taiwo's proposal, wait me 1 second, I want to get the name clear. The resource transfer policy would reach consensus, okay, rough consensus, provided you include those three things. And I want to explain why we're doing this. We want the community to focus on one proposal. The fact that we have three proposals, the authors are not willing to come together. And this is not the final stage. It is just moving one step further. by the time the community focus on one proposal, okay, the community will be able to say, yes, we have one proposal, and we're forgetting about other proposals. Going into last call means it's not the final stage. It's just for us to also iron out some of these issues. We have 3 conflicting proposals. Our responsibility as co-chair is to make the community focus on some of these issues. And on that basis, and that is why we think the best thing for the community at the moment now is to focus on one proposal. And that is why we said, provided those changes are made, it's going to go into consensus. And that is everything with all the 10 proposals. We have 9, the authors, I wanted to ask some specific questions, but we didn't have enough time. So we'll go back to the open mic, overrun some of these things, and we'll continue. And those are the decisions on all the 10 proposals. Thank you very much. So we're going to continue with the open mic, and the next person I'm going to call is Daniel.
Hello?
Hi, Daniel.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Daniel, are you there? Before I call on Daniel, I think Madhvi. Okay, sorry. I think we're running out of time. This is 2:01 already. Can I ask if we can get 5 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes, just to conclude the open mic? Can somebody from staff, can you confirm if we have that? Susan, can we have 5 minutes, please?
5 minutes, okay, max.
Gregory, you have the floor. I'll give 1 minute each. Gregory, open mic.
Thank you. So I feel like co-chairs has mixed one of the important role is, to put all the outstanding issues together and post them on the mailing list so that we can discuss about that. So we don't want to waste our valued time because we are not paid to do this. So my suggestion is that for the remaining policy, please clearly put on the mailing list what are the outstanding issues. The second point is about the online challenge. Some people need to buy airtime on 4G, etc. So most of our members are ISP. Can Afrinic lead and ask members that can help to give free airtime, credit, or a law for free internet access so that online meeting or webinar can be do it easily. I'm sure technically it's possible, and if else, AFNOG is there. I'm one of instructor. I can help for any technical challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alain?
I should express my disappointment on how the co-chairs proceed, because Madhvi said that staff is going to ask the RIA about the compliance for the trade policy, and you did not accepted that we wait for that confirmation before you make a decision. So I think this is wrong. And also, I'm also laughing, angry but laughing that currently we have, for example, a policy on abuse. We have a policy in abuse, and we are just moving from the optional mode to the mandatory mode. And we are saying, no, we don't have a definition of abuse, but do people know that Section 8 of the CPM has an abuse contact? Where are we going? Where are we going? My last point is going to be there is a confusion from everywhere. If you look at the current PDP is clear. We discussed on the mailing list. We come to a PPM. PPM is open for anyone to join online, etc. And any decision we make here goes back on last call to the mailing list. So I don't know why we are confused that some people, we go to PPM, some people are not allowing in, is exclude people. And my last point is that also on the policy things that a policy does not need to come back to the PPM. Yes, the current PDP allow you, co-chair, to fast track, to vary the process. So if you think that the policy, a proposal has been amended, is clear, it does not need to wait for a new PPM, you can vary the process. So why are we just trying to look at, we have nothing in place, we are in an empty space? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan. Yes, the problem is sometimes I agree with you on some of the points, but sometimes it is a bit vague. And if we decide to do that, it gets complicated sometimes. Okay, we have Daniel is back, so we can have Daniel. And Daniel is going to be the last person because we are running out of time. We really need to close. Daniel. Do we have Daniel? Can we have Professor? Okay, we have Daniel. And I just want to emphasize that we're going to send a comprehensive, we are going to send details on all the policies, how we reached consensus. We're going to send it on the mailing list as soon as we can. Okay, but I tried as much as possible to go through everything one after the other, to give as much details as to why and how we arrived at those decisions, because we think even our decision-making process needs to be open and transparent, and that is what we want to give to the community. On this basis, we are running out of time. This is 6 minutes past the time, okay? But Professor Neil, can I give you 30 seconds?
Caution that I mentioned I see a pattern of certain new entrants pushing things in a certain direction. Let's be careful about it. But Mr. Co-Chair, I tend to think that it may not be your job to be dictating a one policy, so you should be also cautious on how you articulate your intention. You can only urge members to join, but join policies. But the way you are going about it is as though you want to have one so that we can modify that one. And I don't think it's the right.
No, we looked at the one that has the least number of objections, and we looked at the major objection on this and said if they agree, on the objections. I think we are running out of time now. We don't have time anymore. We need to head. I want to thank everybody for coming on to this meeting, and I would say on this point, I want to say thank you very much. And on this note, we're going to end. Thank you.
For joining us for this PDP session. It has been very engaging, and thank you all for taking time to join us for this meeting. Before we go, I would like to make a few announcements that I think are very important for us to know how we are going to proceed tomorrow. First of all, this is about the annual general members meeting. I have